If you want to talk, then let's talk balls.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video. It's Mark, 1/3 of the Ball Boys. Unfortunately, Dylan and Dan cannot join me in this video because we are practicing social distancing to help flatten the curve. I'm here to talk about the 20+ superstars that just got released from WWE, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on where I think they're all going to end up, so let's get started. First up is the Revival. The Revival have requested their release months ago from the WWE, but they have never been granted it. So they finally got released from WWE. That was earlier in the week. That was first of the many releases that WWE did. I think they're obviously going to All Elite Wrestling AEW because they really value tag team wrestling there, and they will have a lot more creative control, and they will have ultimately a lot more success in AEW. Next up is Kurt Angle. Everyone knows who Kurt Angle is. He's a wrestling veteran, a wrestling legend. He won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck. That's a quote. He actually did do that. He also says it a lot. But I think a place that he could end up is Impact Wrestling. I think he would honestly do maybe one more match to put a younger guy over, or he could just stick to a manager position, which is what he was in WWE. He did wrestle a little bit. His last match was against Baron Corbin, which didn't make any sense. It should have been John Cena, but of course they picked Baron Corbin, the guy who everyone literally hates. But I think Impact Wrestling could be a good spot for him to end his career. Next up is Drake Maverick. He is a guy who was the manager of the Cruiserweight division. He is a guy who wrestled a little bit here and there. He did have this weird storyline with his wife where he was trying to, I don't know even what, no one really knows what he was doing, but his wife didn't want him. And so he wrestled a little bit, not as much probably as he would have hoped, but I think a good place for him to go could be Ring of Honor. A lot of guys that WWE got their start in Ring of Honor, and that's sort of where they picked him out from. So I think Drake Maverick could go to Ring of Honor and show that he is a very good wrestler, because in my opinion, I think he is a pretty good wrestler, so I think that could be a good place for him to showcase his talent. Next up is Curt Hawkins. He's the man with the longest losing streak in WWE history. I think he's had like thousands of matches and he hasn't won one. It's really sad because he is a great talent. I know he owns a professional wrestling developmental school. It's called Create a Pro. That's where MJF got trained. So I think a place that he could end up is AEW in a part-time basis, just because he has to run his school and that stuff. But I think All Elite Wrestling could be a good place for Curt Hawkins to end up. Next up is Zack Ryder. Woo woo woo. One of my personal favorites, who I think was very underutilized in WWE. He really only had that one big moment when he was really over, when he won the ladder match for the IC belt at WrestleMania, and then he lost it the next night on Monday Night Raw to The Miz, which was so dumb. But the Zack Ryder is a guy who's put in the work, longtime WWE guy, but never really got to see the light of the day. A place that I think he is going to end up is All Elite Wrestling. He is best friends with the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, who happens to own and run AEW, so I think that could be a good place for him to go. Next up is Heath Slater, 1/3 member of the three-man band, the only guy to not have a world title run. His other two members, Jinder Mahal, who had that weird little run that no one really wanted, but they gave it to us anyway. And another guy is Drew McIntyre, who just beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, who is on top of the world right now. He is so over. So Heath Slater never really saw the success that his members of the three-man band did. And he had that title, the tag team title run with Rhino, which was pretty cool, but then he lost the belts, and he hasn't done much since. He is one of those guys who's sort of just a jobber, trying to chase the 24/7 championship, that weird little group of people. But a place that I could see him ending up, again, could be like a Ring of Honor. I think that could be a good place for him to showcase his talents and really get back to the technical side of wrestling and show that he is a good wrestler and more than just a stupid little gimmick. Next up is Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson. The Good Brothers, the OC, 2/3 member of the OC. A place that I could see them going is All Elite Wrestling, or I could see them going back to New Japan. But I think AEW is going to be a good place for them. They both like to wrestle in America, so I think going to a place that really values tag team wrestling and can have people showcase their talents is a great place for them, and that place is AEW. They never really got to see the success that they did in Japan in WWE, so I think they could find that success again with All Elite Wrestling. Next up is Rusev. He is a guy who never really got to see the big stage of WWE. One of those guys that at one point was so over with Rusev Day when he had that rivalry with Aiden English. Everyone was behind him, and then he never really won a belt or did anything with it. It fell flat on its face, and the fire burned out because of WWE. He had a weird storyline with Bobby Lashley marrying his real-life wife, Lana, and then Rusev was trying to like get his wife back, and I just thought that whole thing was a super weird storyline. It had to be tough to watch your real-life wife make out with not you. I think it's one of those guys that just got trapped in WWE with a really bad gimmick and really bad storyline writing. So I think a good place for him to end up could be Ring of Honor to really get back to that good technical based wrestling. And then if he wants to, he could come back to WWE, or he could go to All Elite Wrestling, or he could take his talents to Japan if he really wants to become an all-around better wrestler. Next up is No Way Jose. He's a guy that was solely based on a pretty big party gimmick, which never seems to have success. We saw it with Adam Rose and the Rosebuds, and then No Way Jose and his Congo line. Those gimmicks just don't really work these days. Any wrestler that's solely based on like a really strange party gimmick like that, in my opinion, is not going to work at all. And we saw it there. He was in NXT, got called up. They didn't do much with him. He was one of those guys that is a jobber that was sort of always trying to go after the 24/7 belt in that little mosh pit group that was always seemed to be chasing the belt whenever someone else would win it besides them. But No Way Jose, I could see a place for him to go could be Impact Wrestling. If you wanted to find another gimmick sort of like that and showcase his talents, I think Impact could be a good place for him to go. Next up is Sarah Logan. This one did surprise me a little bit, but I feel she was, again, underutilized in WWE. A place that I could see her going could be Women of Wrestling, which is, it's WoW, or I could see her going to AEW. I think that could be a really good place for her to go and showcase her talents and sort of let the world see what she could really do, because she never really got to do that in WWE, which is a common theme with all of these wrestlers, is they never, in my opinion, I felt like that they never really got to show us what they were really made of. So going out to the indie circuit where these other wrestling promotions could show us what they really are made of. Next up is Mike and Maria Kanellis. They never really got to kickstart their WWE careers because Maria was pregnant. I mean, everyone just seems to have this weird storyline while they're in WWE. And then I think probably a year ago they signed like a 5-year extension for WWE. So I'm sure that they do get some money from them for that. But they were in New Japan before, so I could see New Japan being a good place for them to end up once again. Next up is Aiden English. And if I'm being honest, I completely forgot that he even was on the WWE roster. He was one half member of the Vaudevillains in NXT, which I did like that tag team. That was during a time of when NXT had a bunch of really good tag teams. I mean, they still do, but it was sort of that like group of tag teams that was just impeccable, and then they get called up and then WWE does nothing with them. He was a commentator towards these last few months, and then I know that he had that feud with Rusev, which was pretty cool, but then after that he just stepped into a commentator role and then ultimately got released from WWE. A place I could see him going could be Major League Wrestling. That's just a good place. MJF went there as well. That could be a good place for you to showcase your talents and showcase what kind of wrestling skills that you really have. Next up is EC3. This is a guy who did request his release from WWE months ago, and then they never really granted him it, so they sort of just sat him on the bench for a while. They had him on the shelf. This is a guy that does want to go to AEW, and that's where he will end up going, is All Elite Wrestling, and I'm praying that they have him feud with MJF, because that would be awesome. Me and Dylan talked about that for months, really, once we learned about MJF. EC3 had a good run in NXT, then he got called up to WWE, the main roster, and then they really did nothing with him. He's one of those guys that was chasing a 24/7 belt in that little group. Seems like that whole group sort of just got released, but he is a guy who's going to go, not I think, he will go to All Elite Wrestling, and he will have a great career there. Next up is Lio Rush. Former Cruiserweight champion. He is in the Cruiserweight division, 205 Live. He was a guy that got released, but then he signed again with WWE. He was helping Bobby Lashley, who's sort of like the mic man, the hype man for him, which I thought was cool. But they really just did nothing with him in his singles career. Then he ultimately got released from WWE. So a good place I could see him ending up is Ring of Honor. I think that could be a good place for him to really work on his wrestling and showcase the talent that he has. Next up is Eric Young. This is another veteran spent a lot of his career in TNA Impact Wrestling, and he was a member of Sanity in NXT, which I thought was a great little faction, and then they got called up to the main roster, and then WWE did nothing with him, which is what happens all the time. But a good place I could see him ending up is Impact Wrestling. I think he could go back home there and just finish out his career. Next up is Primo and Epico. I forgot that they were even in WWE. Those are two guys that never really wrestled a lot in WWE. So a good place I could see them going to is AAA Wrestling. I think that'd be a good spot for them to end up and really work on their craft and show everyone what kind of wrestling skills they have. Next up is Erick Rowan. This is one that surprised me probably the most. He's a guy who had a pretty big storyline with whatever was in his little cage. They seem to be putting a lot of time into writing his storyline for him. He was one part of the Wyatt family. Luke Harper is now in AEW, who is the other member, and Braun Strowman is the Universal Champion, who is feuding with Bray Wyatt. But a place that I could see Erick Rowan ending up could be All Elite Wrestling. Maybe he goes with the Exalted One, who now goes by Brody Lee, was Luke Harper. I think it'd be cool to see them be in the same little tag team faction together. So a place I see Erick Rowan ending up is All Elite Wrestling. Next up is referee Mike Chioda. I think he's going to All Elite Wrestling or Ring of Honor. He's a veteran referee. I believe refed for 31 years. A place I could see him going, like I said, Ring of Honor or AEW. I think those are two great destinations for him. I know he will have no problem finding another job. So we have a whole slew of NXT people that were released in NXT and NXT UK. So this is going to be too long of a video if I sit here, and I don't know a lot of these people, but I'm just going to ring off the list, and then you guys let me know down in the comments below where you think all these guys end up if you know more about them than I do. So we have Deonna Purrazzo, we have Alexander Jakic, sorry, I know I messed that up, MJ Perkins, Dorian Mack, Cassius Ohno. I do know Cassius. He had a good run in NXT. They moved him to NXT UK, and then I'm not too sure what they did with him there. I don't think they did much with him, but I know he's one of those guys that was a long-time NXT veteran. I think he could end up in Ring of Honor. He's sort of this already established guy, so I think that could be a good place for him to go and finish up his career. Next up, we have Tanara Conti. We have Dan Matha. We have Nick Ogarelli, we have Cesar Bonani, we have Mars Wang, we have Tino Sabatelli. I do know him. I think he was in, I can't remember the name of the show, but they did a show based around NXT guys way back when, and I know that he was in there. I think he was a former football player. I think he was a kicker for the Giants. We have Faisal Kurdi, we have Hassan Aldaljal. I know I said that wrong. My apologies. Mohammed Fahim, Marcos Gomes. We have Edgar Lopez. We have Yifeng, who goes by, I don't know, Rocky was in parentheses. I think he went by Rocky. And then that's it. So those are all of the NXT people that got released. I think those are all reportedly released from Dave Meltzer, so you can take that as you would like. I don't know if they're officially released yet, but that's a lot of people that WWE did release. They ultimately saved $8 million. I know with those main roster guys, they were making around $8 million, so WWE did save that much money, even though I'm pretty sure that their profits are looking at $1 billion this year. They want to save $8 million by releasing a bunch of people. I know some of these superstars are happy to be released. Some of them are probably crushed. I know the NXT guys and girls are probably crushed, but I definitely think that these getting released is going to be a turning point for them in their careers. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. This is all we really have. We're working on trying to get the podcast back up and running. If you didn't know, we do have a podcast called Let's Talk Balls. The audio for the episodes are on YouTube. If you head to our YouTube channel, you can listen to them on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Apple iTunes. We're on there. Everywhere you listen to a podcast, just look up Let's Talk Balls and we will be there. Follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Balls Pod. Follow us on Facebook at Let's Talk Balls Pod. And follow us on Twitter at Let's Talk _balls. I will see you guys next time.